So welcome to the first part of a four-part series where we're going to take a look at the stats from this year's VCT. Now, am I milking content because I'm going on holiday soon? Yes. So for the next 4 days, this being the first, you will see videos about the stats on these maps. But still, will you learn something? Maybe. Hopefully. And it will cover for some of the time that I'm on holiday. There won't be a video on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so unlucky, I guess. But enjoy it whilst you can. And so let's dive into it. The VCT 2023 comps meta. The data includes all of the tier 1 games from lock-in, all the leagues, LCQs, champs, all of it, and a tiny little bit of NA tier 2. And let's start with Ascent here. And quickly, I'll just show you what you're looking at. Obviously, you got the comp here, and I've given it a little name there at the top. It's PR pick rate, just means how, the overall pick rate versus all the comps. Adding up to 100% here, and then this is non-mirror win-loss. What that means, non-mirror is, say if this comp here, this meta comp played against this cypher comp, that would be a non-mirror game because at least one agent is different. That's what non-mirror means. Basically, not just a mirror match where all the agents are the same for both sides. And then win-loss is how many times did it win? So for instance, this top comp here won 25 of those non-mirror games and lost 23 of those non-mirror games, which is 52% overall. And now let's talk about some of these numbers. And the first thing is, what the hell is going on? Because I'm sure most of you knew, like, okay, Ascent is a very stale meta, but these exact 5 agents, not any different, right? Not a Fade for a Sova, not a Astra for an Omen, not a Cypher for a Killjoy, or, things that are doing very similar things anyway. Just these exact 5 agents are more than 2/3 of every single comp played on Ascent this year. More than 2/3, just 5 agents. Absolutely insanity that we have a meta that is this stale. And you might think that that's going to be happening for later on in these maps or whatever. Nothing comes close to this, right? This is truly on the extreme end. And, well, the problem is as well, this comp is still positive in its non-mirror win rate, though, right? When people deviate from the meta, the meta comp is still coming out, around 50%. It's still doing slightly better than 50%. So the justification is there to play this comp because everyone knows how this comp works, right? Everyone has scrimmed or played this comp a million times at this point, right? So there's no surprises with this comp. There's nothing really new that's going on Ascent, pretty much. It's just this comp and everyone knows how to play against it. So you might think that, the non-mirror win rate wouldn't be so high because everyone knows what you're doing with your comp. But if I play a cheeky comp, a bit different, then maybe you don't know what I'm about to do, right? But it doesn't matter because this comp is just so ingrained and seemingly, somewhat resistant to other ideas being better than it, right? It does seem like just a good comp. And so if you're a team playing it, right? Hey, this is going to be a good comp. We already know all the things because we've played it for ages and ages beforehand or on a different team, right? Everyone knows the roles. Everyone knows what to do with this comp anyway. It's just a very easy, lazy way of having a very solid comp that what's going to go okay for you, right? And so that's why that number is so high, and it's going to probably continue that way. Even with the jet nerfs, I still think that would be the case. Now, looking at some of the other comps I've got here, this Cypher comp is really just a little, top tip of the hat to Nats there, where he really Team Liquid were the team playing this comp, but did find success with it, as you can see in the non-mirror win-loss there. So congratulations to Nats and Team Liquid for, making the Cypher work. And really, the Viper Sky is the only, comp that you saw even a bit of the time, or this Viper direction, that I would actually say is actually different from the meta, right? That had some success that was, kind of different from the meta. I mean, just look at the pick rates though, right? This is some of the highest other pick rates for some of these comps. And we're looking at 3.5% versus 67, which is absolutely insane. This was the better version of the Viper direction, where, some teams were playing without the Killjoy, and that didn't work as well, I don't think. And this, we saw teams like C9 and Loud have some success, playing this kind of Sky Viper Killjoy style. And here is just the data for, when we group the similar kind of comps together, right? So the different ways of playing this map, I've got the meta version here. So this is the main meta comp plus the Astra version of that, the Cypher version, the Fade version, right? Which are all doing basically the same thing anyway. Then you've got these Viper comps that maybe are doing something slightly different with the double controller. Sage comps were a tiny, portion of the meta here that have kind of completely died out. And then you've got the other comps here, which is stuff like Paper Rex's, Harbor Viper stuff and, with Arena. And you've got, the M80 like triple initiator breach stuff as well in there, right? Like when people are going a bit really like far of left field a bit, those are kind of some of the other comps that were involved here. But you can see, I mean, 81%, just an absolute astronomical amount. And I really do hope that Riot rotates this map by the time that we get to VCT next year, because I don't really see anything changing, even with the jet changes. And I think, considering it still has a positive win rate, you would have to say that the best comp probably on that map is just the boring meta comp. Okay, moving on to Bind, and Bind also has problems. Now, it's not the same problem, as you can see by some of the pick rate numbers here for these Bind comps. These are some of the top played Bind comps. So we don't have the same problem as Ascent. The problem is, though, if you take a look at, some of the agents that are on here, oh yeah, 4 of those 5 agents are the same. And pretty much, other than like maybe a Harbor for a Brim, these 3 agents in the middle were played on a ton of comps on Bind. I mean, like most of the comps on Bind had these 3 in the middle, Harbor or Brim +1, right? Which basically means, again, that most of the comps here were doing a very similar thing, right? Maybe there's some slight differences, like if you do play, a double duelist, double dive comp, that is going to play out slightly different to putting a Cypher instead of a Jet, right? You are going to play in a different style between those 2 agents for sure, but the kind of zooming out large scale ideas of approaching the map, are very, very similar. Again, a very, very set meta, just some disagreements on exactly what to play as that 5th. You see here that, the Chamber version, the Cypher version were doing pretty well. Fnatic were playing this Cypher version. We saw some teams like EG playing the Chamber version at Champs. Some of the like double dive stuff with the Jet or the Neon didn't work quite as well. But if we go on to kind of grouping those comps together again, right? Every section of this pie chart, apart from the other here, is, again, gonna be pretty much Brim or Harbor, Viper, Raze, Sky, plus Sage, plus Cypher or Chamber, plus Jet or Neon, plus Fade or Gecko or KO, right? Like, that is what is going on pretty much on this map. And it's just a small percentage of the rest of it, 14 or so percent, that's it for like different ideas on how to approach the map from like a big perspective. That's it, which is a crazy tiny amount when you think about that, really. And so basically, yeah, most teams are approaching Bind in a very, very similar way. Okay, Fracture obviously is rotated out, so we won't spend as much time here on Fracture because of that, right? Here was some of the comps if you are interested. And you can see, some interesting comps were actually the most picked. I wouldn't have expected the double dive was actually the most picked comp on Fracture, which again, I would say has a similar problem to Bind, right? Again, you look at this list, it's like, yeah, 4 of those 5 agents, again, were very, very similar across a lot of these comps. Maybe, again, it's a Cypher for a Killjoy instead, but other than that, it's a lot of Brim, it's a lot of Raze, it's a lot of Breach, and then it's one of Killjoy or Cypher, and then it's one of the, something else, right? And we saw, quite a bit of double dive. Teams like T1 were playing this throughout the year. We saw, Fade was a pretty popular pick, but I think kind of by the end of the year, Sova somewhat supplanted that. As Sova with EG obviously had a very good win rate with the Sova on this map. Although Sova's one of those weird ones where I think the more it got played, the kind of less effective it was, because people knew where those darts were landing. They weren't dying to like dart lineups nearly as much, right? But the Sova was still very good, as EG showed, and no one dare play EG pretty much on that map because they were so good. I think a bit of a disheartening thing for me was there wasn't a lot of like other directions teams went in. We saw last year with FPX where there was a bit of Omen Viper. That kind of died out, not completely, but for a lot of teams that did die out this year. And so we didn't really have that necessarily that clear like other approach, the other way of approaching the map like we did last year. And so it just ended up in a lot of kind of similar sort of vibe. And now let's move on to Haven, where you might look at this number here for the Metacom, right? 39.15%. That's pretty high number, right? And then if you add the Astra version of this comp as well, that was a fairly played, you'll probably get over 50% between those 2 comps. Like, oh no, Haven is also stale like Ascent. But actually, in my mind, Haven isn't nearly as problematic as Ascent is, because in my mind, the best comp on Haven is pretty clearly this Swamp comp, or at least a version with this Viper Sky instead of the Silver Breach. I really do prefer that comp, and I do think that that is the better direction. And we saw teams like Loud, like NRG find success. Obviously, the Guard in Tier 2 as well, with the kind of Omen instead of the Harbor, found a lot of success on Haven, you know, and managed to win Ascension, you know, somewhat off the back of that. Like, I really do think that the Viper version of Haven is really strong, and I personally think that that is the way to go. I mean, the win rates here for some of, you know, the meta comps, you know, weren't that great. The Astra version did outperform the Omen version quite significantly, and obviously a lot of those wins will have been against just the Astra version for the Omen version. But I do think that this either Swamp comp or Omen Viper, whatever it is very strong, and I think that that honestly is a way that, you know, a team's should be approaching this map. Now, I put the Raze comp here at the bottom as well, just because I think that this is a direction that you might see teams go for, right? We saw Team Secret playing this comp with the Raze, you know, basically the meta, but just Raze instead of Jet. And I think with the Jet nerfs, Haven is actually a map where you might see some difference. I think on Ascent, Jet will still be meta. I think Haven is a map where I could see it, right? I could see some experimentation. Now, maybe ultimately Jet ends up winning that battle anyway, and Jet does just end up being the de facto agent still on Haven. But I think there's at least a chance that, you know, a Raze, a Neon, could see some experimentation and some play, you know, particularly early on. You know, we might not get to see it by the time VCT rolls around, but I do think that, you know, right now that is in play, that, you know, some of these other agents could see some play on that map. But overall, in my opinion, the best way is to go with the Viper direction. I think that that is just really strong. Okay, so that is part 1 of 4. I will be coming back tomorrow and the day after that to break down some more stats. Tomorrow's video will be going through the other 3 maps that were played, some of which are more interesting than some of the maps that we saw in this one.